Hello, kind-hearted people of Earth and beyond. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast, the podcast that aims to inspire people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness. My name is Brandon Blanks. I'm a writer and a stand-up comedian. I'm also the producer and co-host of this show. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode of the Kindness Rising podcast.
Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast. Again, this is Keith Page with my partner in crime, Mr. Brandon Blanks.
How you guys doing?
We are so excited about us getting a chance to be together and our guest on the show today. His name is DiOrio, and if you don't know him, you're going to be fascinated by how he thinks and his ideas and be ready to be stretched and be entertained and have a great time. No pressure, Ian, but you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, honored to be with you too. It's such a great, there's a friendship, and it's an honor to be with this mission of Kindness Rising. I'm excited to participate.
Very cool. So Ian and I have a interesting crossover history that we're going to get into, and then Brandon and I hang out a lot at Moongo, and Ian and I have been starting to hang out at Moongo. So now they've met. So they even met today without me. I'm feeling a little bit butthurt just that they met and I didn't get to be a part of it. But
it's one of many, Keith. So you got used to
I know. Right? to stand in line. And so I guess to get so I'm just going to tell our listeners we've talked about this show that we're recording now. We don't know where it's going to go, so you're going to be on for the ride just like we are. But I guarantee you it's going to be good stuff, and it's going to come from our heart. It's authentic. Ian is, for me, a breath of fresh air because he's real, and our paths have crossed more and connected more since we've been out of kind of what we might call professional, at least church ministry. Mm-hmm. But let's go back, and even before our paths crossed, why don't you tell people a little bit about who is Ian, where did you come from, and
Sure.
And how did some of the road you took to get to where you are?
Yeah, so thankful to be here with you guys, and I so appreciate Keith. It is, as you say, so fascinating how there's so many just layers of relationship, history, similarity. So I'm really grateful for that. I was raised in Orange County, California, raised in kind of a broken home. I'm a child of the 80s, so didn't meet my biological dad till I was 30. Mom kind of is a wonderful woman, but some of the guys who came in and through our lives had some difficulties and challenges, and so I kind of knew what it was like from a young age to be around things like alcoholism, addiction, divorce, and at times aggression, violence, things like that, and that had a radical impact on me. I think as we come from somewhere, all of us. We all have this kind of primordial history that we didn't choose. It was kind of chosen for us. At the time I was born, the place, with my ethnicity, if I was a man, woman, all of that, I kind of come prepackaged. And then it's kind of the unweaving of that nature and nurture and figuring out who we are in the process. So I start from kind of poverty, brokenness, HUD housing, different kind of, no one religious in my family. I mean, probably the archetype of my history is my grandmother, who is just a progressive liberal before Bernie Sanders was even born, probably. I mean, she's just been there before there was done that. My family has deep roots in Costa Mesa. I don't know if you know this, but my great-grandparents owned a house right off 19th Street. I have a picture of that house. They're involved with the Democratic Party.
What?
There's a letter from Robert F. Kennedy to my grandparents inviting to this thing in the 60s that he was doing. So it's interesting. I'm just figuring some of this history out.
Yeah.
So we were kind of raised left-wing, working class, anti-conservative, kind of broken family, young mom, to where I was raised in an environment where I could really be anything and do anything. I mean that. I'm a kid. I have 4 kids, so often I'm like, man, I got to kind of rein this thing in here. But I was really given, in the 80s, which for some was a conservative era and for some kind of a liberal era, depending on where you're at. I mean, the gay rights movement, but then you also have the evangelical movement growing. So you have all this happening. I was raised in a really libertine environment. I mean, I could have, if I was gay, that would have been fine. If I was atheist, that would have been fine. If I was Buddhist or secular, there was no pressure on me. I was also raised in kind of the entertainment industry. So I had an agent from the very time I was a young kid. My agent was named Harry Gold. His daughter Tracy Gold was on a famous show with Kirk Cameron. And
Tracy from Growing Pains, yeah.
Growing
right?
Pains.
Yeah.
So Tracy Gold's dad was my agent from the time I was probably like 8 till 18. My brother was also
How'd you get started in that?
Me and my brother, my grandmother, we just knew we were kind of always these like extroverted balls of energy, you know. And I was always interested in acting, always interested in entertaining people. Anytime I can have a hold court, it's like, yeah, this is what I'm made for, unfortunately, you know. But then, I was always, the arts were always appealing to me. I mean, I'm not a big person, athletic person. I've never been, you know. So words, ideas, theater, expression, art, music, and I think this is why by later on in my story I was so drawn to megachurches because it was like, man, here's a platform. Give Ian a mic and a platform, like we're gonna make something happen here. And so I realized I kind of grew up in this liberal environment, entertainment-oriented environment. My grandma just started exposing us, and I still remember me and my brother going down to do a little audition, read a little script for Harry Gold, who represented some significant people and did some big things. I mean, I remember going auditions with I was like a little chubby kid, right? So all my friends were the guys who became like Pugsley in the Addams Family, or like, you know, like the chubby kid on Wings, you know, or something like the major shows. And I never got those jobs because I was neither big enough or smaller enough. It was so frustrating, you know. I still have deep pain for that, as you can tell. But I grew up in this environment where I was in Hollywood a lot. I mean, we had passes to Universal Studios because there was kind of this sense that one of these kids is going to take us out of this. And, you know, that's at least for me. And I always felt I was going to be the kid who did it. That Ian's going to be the kid who takes us out of this, you know, or brings us to, you know, whatever. And I kind of had that pressure on me a little bit. And my brother was on a TV show called Daddy Dearest. I always tell people that one of the coolest things about me is I did shake the hand of Frank Sinatra. My brother was on a TV show called Daddy Dearest. Google it. 2 people on that show. Richard Lewis and Don Rickles. Now, I don't know if your audience knows Don Rickles, but this is a pre-woke era.
Right.
He was a very, I mean, some would say racist, and you can't probably disagree with that kind of comedian. The show was bombing the second season, and so as an attempt to lift off the show, he had Frank Sinatra come in for the last episode. And I was on set during that time, and Frank Sinatra went and shook the hands of all these kids. And so I feel like, you know, I'm as mafia bossed out as you can be because as a little kid I shook. So I was raised, and I remember going to Paramount Studios, hanging out, and being amazed by the food. Like
the food on sets is crazy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
that
great,
makes you want to be an actor, just that.
Yeah, the crafty is pretty impressive. It's like a party,
It's a total party, and I took acting class. I was just very influenced in that. So I thought I was going to be an actor, but obviously I just didn't get, you know, no one was calling me to set to the degree that I wanted, you know, and that was kind of hard. I watched my brother do a lot of cool stuff, a TV show, commercials like Deion Sanders, a Nike commercial, did a major Greyhound bus advertisement commercial. So, and now he's a tattoo entrepreneur. Shout out Papa Joe, Renaissance Studios in San Clemente.
Nice.
And my brother's just a hustler. He's amazing. But we kind of grew up in this environment where it was like entertainment oriented, not really a dad around, open to whatever. So I was experiencing drug use from a very young age, very exposed to just whatever adult things you could be exposed to, unfortunately. And the acting thing never really kind of took off. But when I was like 15 years old, my cousin Michelle came home. And she gave me a mixtape from a guy named Frankie Knuckles. I don't know if you guys know who that is. But he's a New York underground house music DJ. He's one of the inventors of like underground deep house techno kind of music. Frankie Bones, Frankie Knuckles, Derek Carter, Mark Farina. I mean, I love Mark Farina. Yeah, Mark Farina is like, you know, the king of the decks. So when I was 15, I fell in love with electronic music, and I was a kid during the time of the bosoming of the Los Angeles underground rave club culture. Wow. And so I was a rave DJ from the time I was 15, 16. I dropped out of high school. Just because I told my mom I wanted to pursue DJing full time. So I got pictures I could show you of me as a little DJ kid.
So how do you go from hearing a mixtape, like it's one thing for all of us to hear a mixtape, to all of a sudden you're becoming a DJ? I
think it was more I fell in, okay, like, and this is, I think it goes back to my nature. I gotta find this picture, but it goes back to my nature of like, I like creating community and life. Mm-hmm. And when I went to the first underground party, I didn't do drugs, but I loved this idea of like community, and the vibe was all about this notion of plur, peace, love, unity, respect, right? And I remember being at the Masterdome in San Bernardino at 15 years old at a rave, and a girl coming up to me thinking I was on ecstasy and rubbing my arms with lotion and, telling me how loved I was and welcome to this beautiful utopia environment. And I actually didn't do drugs. And this is kind of a crazy thing, like ecstasy, those party drugs. I always did other things, but like till I was like 3 or 4 years into the scene, I was really drawn into the music and the club, and I wanted to learn, how do we create this ecosystem? So because my cousin was a promoter, I, from a young age, would go to these nightclubs. I still remember it, like out till 2 a.m, hands of flyers promoting the next event, right? Trying to get people
just helping your cousin out, basically.
Helping her. And then I just was like, I told my grandmother, peace out, love grandma, Val still representing. I said, Grandma, I love this. And I have a friend who was doing parties with me, and I was always kind of a weird kid. But my friend Brent, he went to my grandma and said, Ian does this. I mean, when Ian shows up, like this is something he's good at. And so my grandma, I remember, like it was yesterday when I was like 16 years old, took me down to Guitar Center. Instead of buying me a car, she bought me $3,500 worth of DJ equipment.
Whoa.
And I told my grandma, like, it gets emotional. I told my grandma, like, I will make a living out of this. So I dropped out of high school, and from 16 till about 21, I lived as a club promoter, rave DJ, party promoter, traveling all over from San Francisco, Philadelphia, just parties, throwing parties myself, parties in the multiple thousands, making money, losing money, working with other promoters. And that underground rave culture, this was all pre-social media. This was all this was like, you went to a website called Rave Links, and you had to go literally to like a liquor store. You give them an egg, give them $20. They give you a freaking map to another place. And I mean, this is like, I lived that world. And I was part of that. I wasn't, excuse me. I was part of that culture, but it felt like we were part of a culture, not like we were trying to create one or like we're caught up in something.
It was like the hippie revival in a lot of ways of the 90s. I'm really fascinated by the rave culture because they sort of like, a lot of people talk about 9/11 ending the rave culture. It was like that kind of, and the 90s, it kind of died with the 90s, like this, what was sort of the prevailing future that it was leading towards? Does that make sense?
So funny because, I think, well, I'm not against commercialization, but the issue is those who come into a movement after it's been commercialized just have a different association, right, than those who were part of a movement before it was commercialized. And there's often a criticize. So I grew up in this movement that I didn't know was a movement. It's like, does a fish know it's in water? You
were just doing this. It was
almost like organic and organization, like like the Jesus People movement before Calvary Chapel got established and the church started, and right.
Yeah, you should. A guy you should get on this podcast is Ron Decor, who owns Dr. Free Cloud's mixing lab in Fountain Valley. He's the OG.
Oh, I know that. It's right by my work.
Okay, so I haven't talked to Ron in years, so Ron, I'm just trying to promote you. But he's the OG of the Orange County rave and club scene. That homie has been DJing since the 80s. Wow. Okay, he's the sweetest, nicest dude. I want to go see him. But I lived in this thing, and I was young, right? But because there were people who were doing raves, especially in the East Coast, 80s, 90s, or whatever. But it kind of slowly made it to the West Coast. It kind of came from the East to the West, as things kind of do. And I fell in love with the community. Fell in love with the idea that we could create something out of nothing. I mean, I know that's weird for some people, but when I dropped out of high school, like I had to get my GED in my early 20s, and but I knew how to make things. I knew how to, like, you know what? I can take an idea, create an event around it, a community around it, a vibe around it, and launch it. And I think about it now, being older, like how crazy that I could, like how crazy that we would just be like, dude, okay, that's an abandoned warehouse. We're gonna break into it on Friday. This is real talk. We're gonna break into it on Friday. 2 of you are gonna get in there at this time, and you're gonna do this and do this. And we're gonna have somebody come bring the generators at this time, and then we're gonna. I mean, I've had so many crazy stories and events, and I haven't been part of that scene since it's all big and commercial, because I think where my story turns, and we can get into that in a minute. But I now that and I still kind of love music and have done some musical stuff, but I just have. I'm more fascinated by that, the naive just screw it, let's do it. And I miss that. I want to be that. I kind of look at these young kids who are like building whatever, like, you know, Logan Paul's type kids, or these people. Right. You're just like, man, that's kind of like, they're just like, hey, this is the new thing, and we're just going to build out of that. So that was me. I loved it. I also, though, felt there was something, maybe it became that way, that was mildly artificial about it, in the sense that the more I personally got involved with drug use, and that was a big part of my journey, was being heavily involved in drug use. For some, it's like, you know, that changed it for me, because when I was like a 15-year-old kid who loved music and loved just partying, and I thought it was like, this is so cool. All my friends are older and like Rastafarians, and like, you know, I just thought it was the coolest people. Then it's like, dude, I don't know. I'm here for this association with this thing. And then I had a few things happen. I had a friend kill himself out of that scene. And at a party, literally after I left, I got like this, like a pager or text message, I forget what it is, but some type of communication, called this person, and we called and we found out. And that was really like, whoa. Because you can imagine like the 60s hippie movement, then it's like Vietnam and people coming back in body bags, you know. It's like, whoa, this utopia
has at least a shadow, probably.
Yeah, you know, there's you know, we should be wary of utopian thinking. And I think there's a sense that, you know, any movement is really birthed with an illusion. You're offering people an illusion, you know. That's what raves were. You know, it's like, we're offering you this artificial environment where you can just drop your ego and participate and things like that. But I still remember, like, yesterday at 8 a.m, leaving the Masterdome after you've been hugging and cuddling with all these people on the floor, pleured out, as they used to say, you know, and then you wake up and everyone looks like zombies. They're covered in filth. Everyone's fried out, going to Denny's, ordering nothing but water. I mean, these you know, these are the stories, you know, peaked out, you know. And so I just got to a place where, you know, probably because I did it, I remember being called, like, when in high school, the year and a half I went there, everyone would call me all these, like, derogatory names because I was so involved in, like, the rave scene, like gay and, like, oh, look at queer. And then I remember these, like, football players begging to get into one of my parties because all the hottest chicks were in my rave. Yeah. And all, you know, I was DJing, they're like, please, like, you give us a VIP pass. Can you get us in? You'll get us into the Twilight. Get us into this club. Get us into it. And it's like, whatevs, bro, you know? So I used to throw an underground nightclub at the Irvine Spectrum, right where the 24-hour fitness is, and that was the worst thing to do, because you charge kids like $50 to get in because they can't drink, and they're all just it's a mess.
A lot of freak dancing.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, these kids need to be in a church, you know. So they need something else. But so I you know, I just went, and then I think the loss of a friend, and just kind of like stopped it. And during that time, I think that kind of leads well maybe into the next part of my story, which is I got some people who were religious or spiritual or Christian kind of somehow ended up in a circle of people I knew. I think I kind of pulled away from that kind of rave culture. I had a friend who was kind of a rave guy who became a Christian, and he was kind of like, hey, he knew this guy who was a mutual friend, and he was just kind to me. And I grew up in a broken home, and I grew up in I didn't know my dad. I grew up in I went from having an identity. Like, I remember my ex-wife and I, when we were dating, going to a nightclub and people coming up and be like, dude, are you DJing still? And I felt so cool. I'm like, yes, you know. But it was like I had an identity. And then that identity really kind of just, I don't know, grew tiresome, grew weary. There were certain things that weren't being fulfilled in that identity. And then I had some people come around me. And then I've always been philosophically oriented. And my grandma's, a lot of people in my family have high school dropouts, been in and out of prison, things like that. But we always read books in our family.
Did you?
Like, we always, my grandma, I still remember as a kid, she'd be so engrossed in books, and that she would literally, like, you could talk to her face, like, grandma, and she'd be like reading a book and totally oblivious to her. And she gave me, I was also a poet and a writer, and I won some writing competitions, things like that. And so my grandma, I thank God, I guess, or the universe, or whatever it is, because I think who we become is either crushed or kind of extended by the environments we happen to be in often. And even though this environment was super permissive for me, like, you're free, it was also like, but you're loved here, and you can make mistakes. I mean, you you could be human, you know? And so I loved that. And I was always given books and knowledge, but there was never an emphasis on religion. My grandma would say that I'm the only grandkid of hers that she gave a Bible to. And she doesn't understand why, but she just felt like I would need it. And she gave me a Bible as like a young person. I almost died as a baby. I was real sick. And so there was always this kind of like mystery around, oh, Ian, we prayed for Ian to live, and Ian lived, and certain things like that. But so I remember when my friend took his life and I just was pulling out, going to like, you know, invited to like Bible study things and like be invited to things. And it was for me kind of a different environment, but it was kind of centered around like, instead of a center around the music, it was centered around like these ideas. Like we all believe these things, you know, or we're learning how to believe these things better. We're learning how to like, and I don't know, people who believe things are attractive because most people don't know what the hell to believe.
Yeah, Christians certainly have a certainty that's lost in our, that's rarer in our culture than the average secular person, I would feel like.
Well, and, you know, we go through like...
sense of certainty. I don't know if it's actual certainty, but...
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah, James Fowler, he has a great book. It's called The Stages of Faith, and it'd be a good book to read. But he basically talks about, we all go through, you know, neurological transformation. Like we know our brain's not fully formed until we're 25. We go through stages, right? And we go through these concrete adaptations of certain things. Like, you know, kids think things are black and white. It's either this or that. You're either right or wrong, this or that. You're my friend or you're my enemy, or you're whatever. It's this polarization of reality. Well, the reason that it's done that is because, like, literally, like, the cerebral cortex isn't even formed yet. So it's the reptile brain that's fight or flight formed, making these decisions. And that's a binary decision-making device, because it's like, okay, wrestle in the grass. What is that? Dangerous predator or the wind? And this is Michael Shermer, by the way, so I'm ripping him off. What do I instinctually make a decision? It must be a predator, because I don't want to die. If it's the wind, I make a mistake. You know, whatever. So I think we grow up. We need to sink our teeth into certain things, because you can't tell kids. I have 4 kids. I mean, you can't tell kids certain things that may be true that you discover later as an adult, but you can't tell them that at 13. Like you might read Nietzsche and discover life is meaningless and all we are is like primates. But you don't want to tell your 14-year-old daughter that
Right.
going into high school, babe, life's meaningless. All you are is a primate, and you know when you're dead, you're dead. But you know, for me, there was something attractive about that religious view that said, you're purposeful, you're made in God's image, you're valuable, and you're valuable. I think the attraction was like you're valuable, not like I was valuable because I was a good DJ. I was valuable because I was like successful, whatever I wanted, like at that scene to be successful at. But I never felt valued as a person just because of who I was.
Yeah, without some achievement tied into it, right? Or
yeah, and just like you are loved just as you are. Like you're just, you know, and I think those things are true religiously or not. And I think we need to embrace those truths and fight hard to understand why we should embrace those truths, even dependent on our physical or metaphysical perspective. But as a young kid, you know, who didn't have a dad, who experienced a lot of underground culture, partying, brokenness, someone told me that I was loved, that I had a father in heaven that loved me, that always cared about me. So I remember being invited. I was DJing in Vegas for my 21st birthday. I had this picture in that car over there I can show you. And I remember like partying like crazy in Vegas and going home and getting a message from one of these pastor guys that kind of through a friend kind of get connected with. He's like, hey, we're going to Mexico to build homes. You want to go build homes in Mexico? Like someone backed out. It's paid for. Just come. You got to be at the church at 6 a.m. I was like, what time? You know, like, so.
you're in Vegas.
Yeah. I was like, well, yeah. So I remember telling these guys like, if I'm there, I'm there. I'm not, or whatever. So then basically went on that trip as a young guy, just turned 21. And man, I just, it was a transformational experience for me, I got to say. And I remember saying to the pastor, like, I want to do what you do. He's like, you want to be a pastor? Like, what? I'm like, is that what you do? You're a pastor? Like, I didn't know. And honestly, dude, I went gnarly. I mean, I accepted Jesus that summer. By that fall, I was in Bible college. I was going to be a pastor. I was 21 when I got saved, and I was 24 when I was hired as a teaching pastor to speak to like 6,000-7,000 people or whatever at Rock Harbor at that time.
Wow.
And I was hired. So I remember being a Christian for 3, 4, 5 years, and then being invited to share my testimony and speak to thousands of people, which is one of the things that religious organizations do real well, is like, hey, whoever's like a compelling, inspiring young story. It's like, let's get them in front of people, right? So
how did Rock Harbor find you?
I just applied. I was at going to school, and and I applied for an outbound teaching job, and which was like, hey, we're planning young leaders, and there's some people who are still doing ministry and good people. And, I think one of the things that's really hopefully compelling about my story, I've been through a lot of change and pain and transition, but I don't look at any of it with like, oh, I can't believe I did that or believed that. I see everything as a part of, that's where my consciousness, my pain, my life, my dreams, my goals, my hopes, that's where they were at that time. And I think we often punish people for being, like we say, integrity is integer, right? One. But the reality is, man, like, you have one life, but that one life might have manifold manifestations and expressions through the manifestation of your own consciousness and the growth of your own being. And so I think often, like, people who are religious and they become atheists or secular, they're like pissed that they were ever fooled by that bullshit, excuse my language.
Yeah.
And I can't believe, and they become pissed or whatever. I don't have that at all, and I'm not saying I'm an atheist or I think those labels are really unhelpful sometimes. But I just look at it like, okay, I was a 15-year-old kid in the rave scene, and I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. Then I was like a 20-year-old kid who's like, whoa, theology and God and church and whoa, and it is compelling. You gotta be real about it. Like, what other groups in our world gather hundreds, thousands of people on one day of the week? And from the strand that we were from, we put tons of emphasis in marketing and music and and like, who else is doing that? And I mean, Rock Harbor, the joke always about Rock Harbor was like, people go there for the women and the men. They don't go there for the word of the Lord, Like they go there because like, it's like, whoa, Costa Mesa. I remember it's like preaching at Rock Harbor Sunday night. You're like, wow, like look at these beautiful people from Orange County,
Yeah.
So you got to look at the appeal, I think, of just the human, it's like when I saw it's like video of like Woodstock, you're like, wow, what would it be like to be there? There's something appealing just about a diverse population of people gathering under this idea that we're one because we're gathering under this one thing. Yeah. And so I
and let's give context too, because I was already gone from Rock Harbor. I was gone years, so you didn't know me. You may knew who I was, because
totally.
I
knew the story of Keith,
the urban legend,
Keith Urban,
Keith Urban. So yeah, that's not where we met yet.
No.
I think I did hear. I was always close enough to Costa Mesa to hear all the rumblings of all the cool different things happen. I think, Rock Harbor hired this teaching guy that's like a former DJ, former like atheist pagan guy that now is like this amazing preacher. I think that was like, my earliest introduction probably to who you were, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's funny because like I got to be real. It's like, I wonder if I often like, that's my story. But I also knew early on in Christianity that story will play.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, like.
Oh yeah, they love that.
So, and I'm not criticizing that. That's
Right.
true of
Yeah.
Buddhists and Muslims and anyone who has a powerful, probably secular humans, anyone who has like a powerful transformation story that's compelling. Those communities want to gravitate and grab a hold. So I don't go against that.
Right.
And I think, because I just want to be really brutally honest in life now, maybe without the brutal because it's kindness rising, but I want to be really honest, kindly honest about my own humanity and my own brokenness and journey. Because I think, especially when we get into what I do now, I think that's what really plays a role. But I do think I think there was also part of me, going back to my acting days, my DJing days, that can read what success looks like in environments really quickly and adapt super quickly to those environments. It's like, you put me like if you drop me in Istanbul and you're like, go to this meeting, I'm going to be like, okay, I'll know who the top dog is by the end of the meeting and who's leading that and how I can, I just naturally have that acquisition technique. I'm not saying it's good or bad. So I kind of think when I got into the Christian thing, it was like, yeah, I've always been a good communicator. I've always been like, I'm always been comfortable with that and like talking and being free. But I was also like, dude, I know this will play here. And I know that people are, because a lot of religious people feel like, who are raised in it, like, oh, my experience is so boring. I've just been,
I call them indoor Christians.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Indoor Christians. Yeah, the non-born again. Yeah.
Yeah, indoor. That's so funny. But so I knew a little bit, but I also believe I want to say I believe I was 100% sincere. And it's like funny, people will be like, if they ask me what I am now, because I typically don't lean towards a label. But when anyone wants to pressure me, like, well, you didn't really believe it. I'm like, well, bro, I have a bachelor's in biblical studies. I have a master of divinity from Fuller Logical Seminary. I have a doctorate of ministry from Azusa Pacific University. Like, if you don't think I believe the Bible, then you pay my student loans, okay?
Yeah,
you pay my student loans, okay? Because they didn't give me those degrees, okay? I had to take Greek and Hebrew. I had to do all that stuff, okay?
Some heavy lifting.
So I look at myself now, having achieved all that in my by my 30s. I was a doctor by the time I was 32. I was a high school dropout rave DJ, and I was like a doctor in my early 30s. Like
thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I just went.
Literally though, right? I mean, whether or not Jesus actually exists, you believing in him certainly changed your life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, crap, man, I don't know if you exist, but I know believing in you changes my life. I could be totally solipsistic and just caught up in my own philosophical imaginations, and so I think my intellectual proclivities were there. Mm-hmm. And if I became a Muslim, I'd have a PhD in Islamic studies.
Sure.
If I became a Buddhist, I'd have a doctorate in
I don't doubt
transcendental Zen studies. Probably because I just had this natural
all-inness.
All-inness. But here's the thing: the problem with all-inness is you get to the top of the mountain quicker than others.
Right.
Right. So somebody who doesn't have the all-inness in a church, they're always going to stay at the bottom of the mountain and listen to what the man who went to the top of the mountain told them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a guy who can actually climb, you're like, I just kept, this sounds, I hope it's not arrogant, but I just kept educating myself past the context that I was in,
mm-hmm.
and educating myself past the peers I was with. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than everybody. There's brilliant people in evangelicalism and brilliant people in all religions and brilliant people in atheism. And so it's not that. But in any context, there are some subversive set of rules that you cannot educate yourself out of believing and stay in the group.
Like you have to kind of have these presumptions assumed before you can kind of partake in the group? Or?
Yeah, like a good example of Christianity is like if you don't believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus, like Jesus physically, it's like for some you can't be a Christian at all, right? But then you have somebody like Dale Allison who teaches at Princeton Theological Seminary. He's one of the leading New Testament scholars in the world who would call himself a Christian, believes in the resurrection of Jesus, but not a physical resurrection. He wrote a book on it. And, so it's like, I'm not going to tell that guy that according to his context, he's not a Christian. And I'm not going to, but if you're at the churches we were at, there's a belief statement you sign when you come on, which is always interesting too for like seminaries, right? I know there's some seminaries. I didn't go to those types of schools. I don't believe. Maybe some I did, but not dogmatically where you have to like sign every jot and tittle of like you believe this before. Because I always thought that was ironic. It's like, okay, I'm gonna pay you $30,000 to teach me everything I already know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm gonna sign. This is what I know, and I'm gonna pay you money to teach me what I already affirm.
Right.
That seems really ironic to me. I mean, I want to change. I want to come out knowing things I'm not going to affirm now. I want to be informed, educated, changed. And so for me, I went to great seminary. Fuller's an incredible school. I mean, it's still that evangelical, but it's very academically rigorous. They have, an incredible school of psychology. I mean, I went to good schools. I didn't go to like the bottom barrel fundamentalists, but I went to schools that led you to certainly affirm, believe certain things. And then the organizations I were at, good people, great, but those organizations, and Keith, I think will attest to this, it's the relationship. It's kind of like the game only works when we all say we believe the same things. And when we do, so for instance,
the game, I think that's a great way to put it. The game, social game that people play.
Yeah, and that's not true of just
rules.
religion anyway. I mean, I think that could be true of capitalism. That could be true of your views of socialism. It's this idea that this will work if we all just believe in it. Mm-hmm. So if we all just believe in the game the way that we're supposed to believe in it, then the game will work out itself. I actually think, though, there's something like called mutual complicity, which is this idea that like we all know that in the way that we come to believe things, that we give up certain things in the process of believing certain things. Like you're married. Am I the most beautiful woman in the world? Yes, honey, of course you are. Like you affirm, and for you she is, right? But you're not making an objective statement about the world. You're not like scientifically establishing a fact. Here is the most beautiful person in the world, right? But religion's like, it's not like that. It's like, do you believe that this is the most beautiful person in the world? But it has to be factually, historically, scientifically, empirically the most beautiful person in the world. Like, so I'm still today compelled by Jesus. I must say that. I am compelled by the beauty of religious figures at certain times. I am not antagonistic to religion. I think there's so much ugly in it and so much destructive in it. But I wonder what's destructive and ugly in it is just the most destructive and ugly part of ourselves, that we use language and ideology to kind of like hide from ourselves and to mask. So I was going to go back to mutual complicity, but like Christmas, Santa Claus. Like Philosopher Zizek has this great analogy. He says, nobody believes in Santa Claus. Sorry if you're listening to the podcast and I just ruined your life for you. But, kids, you tell an 11-year-old kid, they don't believe in Santa Claus. But if the parent says, what? You don't believe in Santa Claus? That's it. No Santa presents this year. And what does that kid immediately do?
I believe.
No, I believe. No, I believe in Santa Claus. Now, does mom believe in Santa Claus? No. She knows Santa Claus is a lie. Son knows Santa Claus is a lie. But because they both pretend to believe, the belief is true.
Right.
The belief functions as true when you have two people affirm it. And what Zizek says happens like in churches or religious organizations, it's not that people believe. They believe in the person who does the believing for them. They look to the pastor. They look to the monk. They look to the priest. They look and they go, he really believes. She really believes. Therefore, this must be true. And that's why Christians love to hoist up the smartest Christians, or everybody likes to hoist up the smartest version of whatever their sect is, because it's almost like, well, we couldn't be wrong because that really smart person believes that.
Jordan Peterson,
Jordan or William Lane Craig, or I don't know who would be on the Islamic side. No, and again, I have great respect for Peterson. I have great respect for all Craig. Even I gotta say he was influential on me. I look at all this. But I try to like deconstruct what I would call like the psychotechnology behind it. Like what's taking place underneath all of this language and underneath all this, what's really trying to happen? I think this goes to the kindness rising aspect. Like what are people really looking for? And what is expressed in religion or cults or whatever is meeting a need. We'd be foolish to say it doesn't meet a need. So I became all in, and then I married my first wife, who was from a religious home and was very happy in my religious life. I won't get into the details, but I started to go through, I think like my own personal breakdown as a pastor of a very large church that I created, that I took from really nothing and grew to something significant, rebranded, changed.
Which church was that?
It was church in California. Okay. It's now called Active Church. And, I don't have anything negative to say about anybody or that experience, but I'll only speak for myself personally. The burden of changing things, changing religious context for people who are very fit to a certain context, and you're trying to adapt them to a new context. You see people's humanity. And I also felt like I couldn't tell anybody this was hurting me as much. Hurting me to carry the burden of these people's beliefs. And it wasn't like, I don't know what I believe, I'm done. It was just, I know I don't believe everything they believe. And I felt like a hypocrite sometimes because people would come up and I would always say people in the church, everyone always assumes you believe exactly what they believe. They're like, they'll come up to you if they're a liberal. They're like, can you believe these freaking Republicans? They're Republicans, but can you believe these freaking liberals? And and as a pastor, you just go,
you just nod and smile.
You not right, Keith? Totally. Jump in, man, because you nod and smile, but then you have this internal thing. And I was in a church context where there's just a lot of opposition to change, and so I felt personally, and I can only speak personally, that if I raised my hand and like, man, I'm really hurting, I can't handle this, or I want to believe this, because if I don't believe it, I lose everything. I lose my family, I lose my church, I lose this whole thing. And it wasn't that I didn't believe, it just my experience of belief, and I think I was burnt out and exhaustion, and I think I failed. I think the pressure of that caused me to, to be honest, I harmed a lot of people, harmed myself. I wish I had the wisdom to go, I don't know what I believe or not believe. I don't know what I want to do or not do. I just know this isn't healthy. Instead of manifesting unhealth to people who, were around me, in close proximity. You can't hide your unhealth. It's like you can't hide your BO. And
it gets worse, right? If you
Yeah.
try and hide it, you just I never take a
Yeah.
shower. You're like, I don't need to take a shower. I'm fine. I'll never. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of my story, like Keith, I know he shared with this, is I went through a divorce. I want to talk about that. But there's lots of vocations that you can go through a divorce and family challenges and personal life challenges where it doesn't affect your vocation. And being a minister is not one of them.
Right.
Definitely not.
So I have friends who are doctors who could like cheat on their wives and blow up their life personally, and they're going to do spinal surgery on Friday. And no one's going
People are
to.
still showing up, lining up to say you're the best in town.
You're the best thing in town.
Operate, doc.
And I think that was one of the challenges I felt was, Ian, who I am as a person, I think I'm a very loving, inclusive. I want to put my arms around everybody. I want to run the race with everybody. I want to take everybody with me, but I had to come to a realization that some people are in the context that they're in, not because it's true, but because it keeps them from ever asking what is true. It's like I go to that church not because I think it's true, but that church keeps me from asking the question.
It's true enough for me, or maybe I don't, like you said, I don't have to think about what's true.
It's like, check that box. I go to so-and-so's church and that's my thing. Well, I'm too much of a intellectual antagonist personally. So I was doing all the schooling. I studied with incredible people. I mean, I got to take classes with incredible Christian leaders like Dallas Willard, taught one of my doctoral classes, who's the head of philosophy at USC. In the Christian world, he's as influential as anybody would. 100 years from now, people will talk about him as one of the most influential people in Christianity. So I got to study with him. I did my doctoral dissertation under a wonderful man, Bishop Todd Hunter, who is an Anglican bishop. I mean, he's a big dog in that world, and was a lovely, good human being to me for a lot of my life. And I have deep care and love and appreciation for that time. And so I had the best of the best, bro. I mean, I was in the best circles in that world, best people, and they're good people in that world. But for me, I just felt like my car didn't fit in the evangelical garage anymore. And me trying to jam my car in that garage, it's like I'm gonna, the windows are gonna bust. We're gonna break the garage open. So my world kind of blew up, not necessarily by my choice, but out of that, I gotta say, and this is something that maybe, I know we talked about the rock bottom thing and people going, is that I just learned what it was like to be somebody who had a lot of things go right in my life, because by the force of my personality and the force of my energy and the force of my will. And I went to a multi-year season of nothing going right.
How is that? Because those are types of massive loss, death of identity, probably friendships, finances,
everything.
I'm thinking of my own life.
Yeah. You're like, been there, done that.
But for you, because we can talk about that, right? Without any of the details.
Of course,
all the churches and. Right. What was the learning? What was that experience, and what was the learning and the takeaway?
I think the learning is that we fall in love with things, and because we fall in love with certain things, we will attach and give ourselves to things because of that sense of, I love this, whether that's religion or religion is not one of those things where it's like a little bit in. I mean, we used to preach the sermons, Keith. It's like, you're either all in or not,
That's
it's
right.
like hardcore. It's like Jesus didn't call it, So I've always been kind of an all-in person. And I thought I was all into the things that I really loved. But what I also realized, I was just kind of all into me. And I justified my egotism with spiritual language. I justified my drive with, this is for eternity, this is for the, and then when everybody around me who I loved, I thought the most, got hurt the most, and then I lost credibility, I lost relationships. I just had to face me. I had to face Ian, apart from a stage, apart from an applause, apart from a marriage, apart from my kids, apart from an income, apart from a book deal, apart from being on a magazine, apart from a speaking gig. apart from a congregation loving me. And this is the thing, dude. I loved my congregation. I get teary-eyed. I love those people. I baptized 700 people in 3 years. And I take those as precious experiences because I feel like, wow, we were part of a spiritual moment together, something meaningful for you. And that was really profound. And to go from not having access to any of that because I went through something and because of certain things. And so I think I came out of that was like, okay, to be really honest, there's moments where it's like, yeah, no, I don't know if I want to live. Because when the ego dies, your ego attachments die, and then you're left naked. Like, what am I apart from this? What am I apart from people calling me pastor? What am I apart from this relationship? What am I apart from this constitution of economic stature? What am I apart from, and being a reverend? I mean, what's the word mean? To be revered, right? Like, so, it's this idea of, it was historically and still kind of is one of those things where still people like they want more from you. That's why when a pastor screws up, it hurts people differently than when a doctor screws up, because there is a sense like, nah, even if we don't, people will tell me all the time, I don't believe in God, but they get let down, They still want those pastors to be what they say they are, And I think there's probably a lot of people who call me lots of bad things, and because I went through a human experience, But here's the thing. I can honestly say with like every fiber of my being, like what it taught me was that my breath, my identity, my existence does not depend on the affirmation of anyone. And I could be left alone. I could be rejected. I could be, I kind of felt like Jesus, right? Like, the crucified version, the one that we like put on the cross, right? But what I love about that story, and even this, whatever the metaphor of the resurrection for even Christians is, even out of that, there can be an identity that's like uncrucifiable type thing, not killable. And I just had to come to a sense where like, Ian, you're valuable, dude, without a microphone in front of you. You're invaluable without 1,000 people, 2,000 people coming and hearing you talk every week. You're valuable while you're alone in your Corona apartment, wondering when you're going to see your kids next and how you're going to make it through. And that was new for me, Keith, because I think everything my whole life up until that point was like valuable because I'm here. Look at me put on the show. Right. Look at me entertain you. And like you, I'm kind of a charismatic guy. I love people. I still love people. And I just started to discover, whoa, it's like, I remember telling you, I think it was like shaking my own hand for the first time, because all these things about me were always caught up in these things I was in. Oh yeah, I throw parties. Oh, I'm a pastor. I'm a theologian. I'm this or whatever. And then I lost everything, and I realized, you know what? Ian, when he goes to Starbucks by himself, still wants to talk to everybody in there and help them go further faster. When Ian by himself is feeding homeless people, having dinner with them at Taco Bell, not knowing anybody, not telling anybody, nobody knows these stories, just because I saw a homeless person, I wanted to care for them. And all these private things, bad and good, and I'm not a perfect person. I just was like, I don't need that. I don't need to be stroked. I don't need a crowd to affirm me. And then I also had to get to a place of like, going forward, what lies do I want not to live out anymore? Because I think I did live some. And I think it's easy to blame the religion as the lie. But you have to ask yourself, if you came from and out of a religious experience, well, what was it in you? It's kind of like people are, they're married 20 years and they're like, I hate my husband, I hate my wife. I'm like, well, then why were you married to him 20 years? I mean, yeah, it goes so bad, but then you forget the fact that you were actually in love with it at one time. So I try to hold court to my own self and go, okay, dude, you loved this. You loved the church. You loved Christianity. You loved it. Yeah, I was devastated by the pain of rejection from it. And I was devastated by the loss of it. But I also learned, you know what? I don't need a stage to be a good person. I'm still motivated and driven by many of the same things. And I think I can lead us into like our journey. I mean, one of the things that happened in Christianity for me that was very difficult as I was going through my divorce and kind of deconstruction of my world and my losses, I had 4 friends take their life. And as I mentioned earlier, that was really hard. And one of them, was my friend Jared Wilson, which maybe your audience would know. He was a very, very famous pastor. I mean, when you say famous, he was famous. Social media, on the Steve Harvey show. Ryan Seacrest interviewed him when he committed suicide. Every major television show, every major broadcast show, every major magazine, everywhere in the world talked about it.
This was maybe 4 or 5.
This couple years ago, probably about 2-3 years ago.
2, 3, okay, yeah.
3 years ago, probably. I married Jared and his wife. I was his college professor. I was his pastor, his brother. Like, he was like a son to me. Like, and designed my logos for my church. I mean, I couldn't tell where he kind of ended and I began it. Sometimes I'd be on he would call me and be like, I'm launching this thing. I'm just gonna put you on the board, And I'm like, cool, man. Whatever you want to do, you could. I kind of gave him carte blanche, like whatever you want to do. But God, that hurt me.
Did he ever confide in you? Really?
I knew he was very public about his mental health struggles.
Okay.
He started an organization helping people with suicidality tendencies and mental health, and he was very vulnerable in that way. But I think often, people will applaud it, like, oh wow, look at that guy, he's talking about. But no one asks the deeper question. Well, why is that so important to him? Like, what is he really? So I knew he was struggling with things. I was shocked by that event, broken. I mean, I remember this recently. I was driving down the freeway and I was just crying, just telling him I miss him, and I know, that for me was like, gosh, okay, I'm not in the blame game, but I had 4 friends who were like high religious figures take their lives. I went through devastation. I've known people like my brother Keith. I've known people. There was a part of me that was like, wait a minute, dude, I don't. It was like a wake up call. Like, there's something not here for me anymore. And it's not that I want to poo-poo on that, but it was like, man, when the pastors are killing themselves, the people I love, and people want to blame mental health or blame this or blame that. You can always blame, but ask yourself, like, the question, like, how could somebody in an environment where we're supposed to be authentic and real and vulnerable and the best, and Jesus loves us and we're forgiven of everything, feel so alone that they couldn't admit that's the decision that they made? I don't judge anybody for that decision. I deploy empathy in my life completely, 100% for myself, for other people. I can be an angry person, but my anger comes out of my wishing that I could heal, I'm wishing that I could help and wishing I could fix, and that frustration of not being able to do that. I think that was true of me back as a Christian pastor, and I think that's, I'm trying to be more kind, but man, I was angry after that. I was hurt. I was frustrated. It's interesting to think about, even when I tell my story now, how the major transition points in my life maybe be around people who I lost through suicide. I mean, I lost a friend through suicide, DJing, and that was a major transitionary point in my life. And then Jared, I had already transitioned out of professional ministry, but that was something that just so impacted me, and I was just so broken. And that was after I lost everything, lost all my reputation, lost my friends, lost everything. So I was already alone. And when that happened, it was like, wow. So during the time after my world blew up, I did a bunch of things, man. One of those.
How'd you pay bills? And
I did. I probably had like 12 jobs in the last 5 years. No, but I worked. First thing I did was work for my friend's startup, incredible fintech startup, had offices in San Francisco and Southern California. I was their minister of culture, which basically was the guy to, as we went to promote product, go to venue, go to raise money, whatever. Just be the guy in the room who's helping kind of represent our
hype
brand.
man.
Yeah, the hype man, represent our brand, the networker, the guy to build that kind of continuity both online and locally. And I was going through a devastating time myself, but I had to make a living, and so I thank God or the universe or whatever. I have such a tick, and for my friend Dan Cam, and he offered me that. And the kind of crazy story is this was a very incredible fintech. I mean, it was won awards, offices in Arkansas, where more billionaires live in Bentonville, Arkansas than anywhere else in the world. It's where Walmart started.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and so had offices there, and
it's just the Walton family.
It's Walton family. But all the investors, all the people, it's like crazy. But the CEO and founder of that company took his life.
Is that right?
Took his life as well. when there's so I've been around a lot of high capacity leaders
Yep.
who've taken their life, and I think I'm a high capacity leader, but I went through a devastating time. One of the things, Keith, you asked me, knowing when we talked, was like, did you ever think about killing yourself? And yes and no, but I thought of a quote from Albert Camus, who he argues that the first and primordial question of all philosophy is, why shall you not kill yourself? And his answer is, because I do not want to use my freedom to take away my freedom. Why shall you not kill yourself, Albert Camus? Because I do not want to use my freedom to take away my freedom. And I've always been...
Freedom to basically then build a life, create a life.
Be alive, yeah.
Yeah, be alive. So
Choose each day what you're going
right.
to do. Yeah.
So I'm not judging those who do that.
No, of course not.
But for me, when I got to that point, I really settled in that, by the way, atheist quote, right? It wasn't the Apostle Paul or whatever, like, whatever, not criticizing any of that, but it was just like, It was just, I don't want to use my freedom to take away my freedom. I want to manifest my freedom, and I want to change. I have kids. I want to be better. I want to own the things with my kids. I want to own life. I want to say, dude, I'm a kid from the ghetto, dude, who learned how to preach. I'm a kid who, help me. I'm trying to figure out this human thing. So I worked for a financial tech startup. I worked for a media company. I worked for, what else did I do? I worked for a digital marketing agency. I failed at all of this. I'm a great failure at things, and which is good. I think that's a wonderful thing to be. And so it was kind of an interesting thing because I have all these degrees and all this experience in spirituality. Is my faith is deconstructing, my attachment to a religious system is deconstructing, and religious people, and not trying to judge them, but it is quite interesting when you pull out of you take away your affirmation card on some things, and it's like, whoa. I was in the cover of the New York Times in 2016 arguing for evangelicals just to move towards radical inclusion with our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. I used to DJ at a gay club in Costa Mesa back when I was 17. There are certain things with my evangelical experience I was like, really? I was always like the guy who was like, no, we're not really like that. Yeah, I'm a Jesus guy, but come on, bro. In real life, we're gonna love you and bring. You know what I mean? I always had. Even when I was a college pastor, I had gay volunteers, and I always tried to incorporate people in even though kind of get away with it, in that environment, But then when I went,
keep their secrets.
Yeah, when I went public, and was a pastor and all that, whatever. So, but I had all these degrees, and I also had this experience with people and this desire to. When I was working for a certain company, good company, but it was we got up every morning and we were the best at advertising for marketing for a certain industry, just pumping out, selling more of that industry. And it was just dude, I don't want to get up every day and sell more of that. For me, it was and I'm not anyone can do whatever. You make a living. My view is however you make a living, as long as you're not harming somebody, you're doing something that's probably worthwhile, right? I don't think we should have this hierarchy in our society of value. I think it's really inappropriate. But I do think some of us, it's just not the paycheck. It's just not moving product. Those things are fun, but they just give me more opportunity to do more meaningful things. For me, that's what it is. It's yeah, you give me $1 billion. I'm just going to find out how to live the most expressive, generous, grace-filled, meaningful life. I hope I would want to be living towards that. So I worked. So I was like, okay. Trying all these things. None of these are working. I can never be a pastor of a church again. That's over with. Yet I have a doctorate of ministry. I have a master of divinity. What the hell am I going to do with my life? Because there's not many Fortune 500 companies dude, you know who we need in this room? Right. We need a D.Min. We need an MDiv, that's going to solve our problems, right?
Pedigree
maybe it would. You never know. Need a little clergy.
If it was Keith and I, maybe, but I don't know if it was anybody else. But, it's so you're sending the resumes to companies and they're like, oh yeah, we want a pastor on our staff. Yeah, we want and this, whatever. So I was like, okay, there's this thin... And I'm so appreciative of it because it has given me great meaning and new expression to both who I am as a person and integration of my experience in education. But there's this sliver of spiritual work in secular environments that's actually federally, governmentally mandated. And that's what's called chaplaincy. For instance, for you to have a hospice company, hospice is the care for people at the end of life. I went back to school to Cal State San Marcos to do a program in a residency in what's called palliative care. So I have kind of gained a recent more expertise and knowledge in palliative care, end-of-life hospice chaplaincy. And Medicare mandates for there to be a hospice company, they need on that staff doctors, nurses, social workers, and this one person. It's written in the governmental code that you can't have what's called an interdisciplinary group meeting without a chaplain, is a chaplain. Now, a chaplain's different than a pastor because chaplaincy is formed from a clinical approach to spiritual care. What I mean by that is there's this formation called clinical pastoral education, which is like, how do we train people who have been trained in a spiritual context to work in a medical or clinical context that's interfaith, multidisciplinary, and diverse, right? Versus when you're a pastor, you're the answer man. You're the Bible answer man. Bible answer girl.
Right.
You're paid to have the answers, right? To facilitate certain ends to means, raise money, build a building, promote your church, whatever it is. Like that's it. Chaplaincy, the only agenda is found in the person or patient that you're working with and caring for. And it is intentionally interfaith, including secular humanism. Some of the best chaplains I know, represent my boy Keith, are secular humanists, right? And I've told Keith, I don't know how I identify myself. I mean, I don't think I'm an atheist. I do think I'm a theist at some level. I don't know what that looks like and how that applies itself. But my orientation to that is probably more philosophical than it is experiential, frankly. I think there are good reasons to think certain metaphysical truths about the universe. We could get into that on another one. And I'm challenged by certain implications of philosophical approaches, right? And what we lose if we take away certain things and add certain things. So I'm very interested in that conversation, right? But how it all works out, I'm not an evangelical. I'm not an evangelical Christian. I don't have an agenda to transform or convert anybody. My agenda is to learn how to be fully human with people who are dying. And that, I almost feel selfish sometimes, Keith, because I went through like death, not like physical death. And yet the mercy out of that was I got to work with people who are dying, really dying. Not like dying in the metaphorical, I didn't get into NYU sense.
Right, ego death.
Ego sense. Dying in the sense that they have a colostomy bag or they have brain cancer or Mets to their kidney. Mm-hmm. And, you can't solve that, Keith, Brandon. And it's so much religious work. Everything's about solving, That's why every religious, sermon series is 5 steps to a better you, 10 steps to a new marriage, 15 steps to a new financial system. When you have terminal cancer, there is no step other than the declining steps towards the transition to terminal death. Mm-hmm. That's the only step. It's an irreversible type of thing. And we live in such a pleasure-oriented society. I love pleasure. That we are so pissed and resentful about the fact of death. And I think those who have maybe the highest religious orientations sometimes could be almost most resentful because it's like, God, why are you letting us go through this, Right. But also people who are non-religious, mortality scares us all. I mean, I always tell people, like, if you're not scared of death, you're lying to yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're lying to yourself. I'm around it all the time. I hold people's hands as they die. Mm-hmm. I caress their faces. I sing to them. I care for them.
I want to jump in. I'm sure Brandon does too.
Yeah.
And just ask, like, okay, so you were this pastor that, like you said, the stage, the performance, the holding court, and you know how to do that, and then all of a sudden you're in front of your
You're the shaman taking people on the river Styx, basically.
Right, and now all of a sudden you're bedside. What's that shift like for you?
You can't take pictures of it.
Yeah.
You can't promote it on social media,
Right.
Brandon. You can't.
Tough to hype.
Yeah.
I think I first went into it like, okay, I need to make a living, and I'm gonna figure out how to pivot and go. I'm gonna go to law school, pivot, and do something else. This is like a transitionary thing, And I just realized, man, no, this is Ian. Ian is so called to this, equipped for this, whatever language you want to use. Like a friend of mine who's a wonderful man said, Ian, you'll be great at this because you just have an ability to walk in anywhere, anytime, and just get rapport quickly. And every one of my patients has 6 months. So for you to meet me as your chaplain, you've been given a 6-month terminal diagnosis. You could live longer than 6 months. You could die in a day, but all my friends that I've met in the last 2 years have died on me. Mm-hmm. Well, they all died before. They still live. They're on social media and they just want to talk to me and stuff. They're all those friends. All those friends are out there. It's like, what happened to Ian? Right. But all my friends now are dying, and they love when I show up, and they care that somebody cares for them. And it's really powerful what an authority does in the face of death. And I am an authority. I might not be an authority on the afterlife or what happens, but I'm an authority on the dying process. And most people, it's like they don't know how to. Most people don't know how to live. Surely they don't know how to die.
Right.
Because there's a social, psychological, spiritual, physical dynamic that comes into play at different levels and angles all at once, and the person who can solve the problem least amount is the one with the greatest amount of education. It's the doctors and the nurses. We don't cure things on hospice. We don't fix things on hospice. We manage comfort on hospice. We say, this is not going to get better, so we're just going to make it more comfortable. And we're going to try to help you in this time of not being better. But I must say, I do not have an agenda like I used to, and I think that's the wonderful thing. But that's also dangerous because everyone, when you come to believe something, you want other people to believe what you believe, right? Like it's like, this is the best food.
Pretty natural.
It's like, I'm an atheist, you should be one. I hate the world, you should too. And I believe in God, why don't you believe in God with me? Or I'm a Buddhist now, you should be a Buddhist. Like we just have this kind of narcissistic application of whatever we think is so desirable. Absolutely. That everyone else should desire it. I have zero of that as a chaplain. My job is to be your friend. And when you tell me you're scared to die, I tell you, well, I'm going to be there with you. You know how many people, their greatest fear is just dying alone?
Yeah.
That's their greatest fear. It's not death. It's dying alone. And when you can tell somebody, you will not be alone. I will be here. I'm going to hold your hand as you take your last breath. You're not going to be alone in this. I'm not courageous. My kids are like, Dad, aren't you depressed all the time? How can you do this? And I walk away reminded of this incredible gift of life, and it's like a injection to my brain of the preciousness of life, and I get so filled with gratitude. Gratitude is the answer to me, and I was so ungrateful before. I got to say that I was ungrateful of the people around me, ungrateful of like the opportunities I had, ungrateful. I think I appreciated them, but I always wanted more. I'm in a context where I can't do anything. I can't do shit. I can't make more happen. I can't accomplish anything. I can be with them and attend to the human experience. And I must say, I don't fit into any box. I'll give you 2 examples. When I'm with people who don't believe in God, I don't try to make them uncomfortable and do. Okay? Like I don't bring tension.
Right.
And I work for an incredible company. I love the people I work with. They're amazing. The people, secular, atheist, religious, Jewish, agnostic, the people who work in palliative care, hospice are angels in this society. Yeah. They are heroes. They're ambassadors of compassion. And I work with some of the most amazing, educated, brilliant people that I don't care what they believe. They care for people off the streets who are in our care. We care for people who live in $20 million homes in Newport. Like we care. They care for people. It's just amazing. But I always felt I had to add tension to the context of spirituality before to get people to move, Like, you sure you're not going to go to hell? You better give, You sure are you committed to this church? Well, how do you know if you're committed to this church? I'll tell you how you know. You got to look at your bank statement and your butt in the seat. You had all these right, Keith?
Slogans, isms, strategies, all that.
just to get people to give, right? So for me, I don't have any of that. Somebody's an atheist, I don't go, well, do you believe in God? So I'll tell you one story, though. I had a patient dying young. She had a brand new grandbaby. She died the day after she turned 54. She said to me, I'm really sad and hurt that I won't be able to see my grandchildren grow up. And do you want my statement to her was as quickly and easily as anything? I said, well, how do you know that? I don't know that. Do you know that? I mean, there's lots of things that you know and don't know. But I found in chaplaincy, we got to lead with a certain openness to the human. And you ask me, 54-year-old mom wanting to see her grandkids grow up. You're an atheist. What do you say to her? Sorry, that doesn't happen.
Right.
You're not.
Yep, bummer.
You're screwed.
Yeah.
Right.
Shouldn't have smoked.
Or say a religious person bringing religious things like, well, I don't know, maybe if you said the right prayer, you'll be able to see your grand. I mean, whatever the answer is. And some people will, obviously, you're not oriented towards the truth. I'm like, well, then one of you out there email me with the answer to those two questions.
Right. Yep.
Because I know enough about philosophy that, we're going to get to a place, a liminal place, a place where our knowledge and apprehension of truth bumps up against mystery, but bumps up against the liminal and limited nature of human intellect. Now, I'm not going to go build a cult off that. I'm not going to go write a religious book off that and try to convince other people that, the horizon goes further or that you can see your grandbabies raised after your passing. But I'm going to tell you this. There are certain human longings that in the face of death are not met just by natural orientations. Like, just feed this person, they're going to be okay. Just make sure their pain's mitigated and they're going to be fine. There are deep human longings. And I must say, in our history and in our world, the people who have been most educated and trained to deal with that have been spiritual leaders, because they've been given a context, to think about that part of human existence, where everyone else might just be thinking about the feeding and the fighting and the other F's out there. They might, they're more carnally based. So I love that I work in a secular environment. I work with incredibly gifted people who I just honor and think are incredible. And we holistically try to deal with people who are dying and try to bring wholeness and meaning to them. If that means they're Catholic, I get them a priest. If they're atheist, I sit and talk with them. And about their humanism. If they're Buddhist, we bring in meditation. If they're Jewish, we do the Kaddish. And it's not that we're trained in this, Keith, right? This isn't lacking integrity. For someone else, this would be lacking integrity, because you would think that what matters most is your personal belief and the application of your personal belief in life. Right. That's not what's true of chaplaincy. It does not matter if Keith is an atheist or a Christian, a Buddhist, a Jew, secular, whatever he is. That doesn't come into play in the application of spiritual care within the healthcare context. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something powerful to be learned about that.
Right? Yeah. Brandon, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like you were saying, like the make people more comfortable. It's like the hospice does the medicating the body so that they're more comfortable. You kind of medicate the soul a little bit and like transition it. Well, what's interesting, I just lost a family member that was very close to me. It was my first major death. It's my little brother, my half brother's dad, who we hadn't been very close since he dated my mom many years ago. But until someone I knew that I never thought was going to die died, it's the phrase like they died. It doesn't really. I think it's more accurate, at least in my experience. Like they no longer exist, and I think that that's sort of like an interesting thing. I never thought of death, because like that's really what it is. It's like their body dies, but something is gone, and that's interesting to me in a lot of ways as like a secular person. So it's like, because it's they're no longer existing. They're not dead. That's not like a state you can be in, right? There's something that is like death happens, and then it doesn't like. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm
No, I think I understand what you're saying. I think it's kind of like
what stops existing.
It's kind of like, is nothing a thing? Is zero a number? Right? I think you're kind of getting into that same logic. Like, and what I would say is this: working in the context I do, I got to just be real about it. I lean more towards metaphysical dualism than materialism. So I'll just unpack those for the audience real quickly. Yeah. The question, the primary philosophical question about human beings when it comes to like the nature of human beings. I'm talking about like nature in terms of our proclivities, like, you know, what's your nature? You know, are you gay, you straight? Do you like football or science? You know, but the nature of human beings into what like constructs and constitutes our nature. Like, what are we made of? You know, there's been classic philosophical approaches to that. The dominant approach since obviously the birth of science and the birth of the Enlightenment has been materialism, that you and I are material objects, that we are meat machines, physical puppets, you know, meat puppets. You can think of all these kind of fun, different type of ways that we can think
wet
about.
robots. That's a good
Wet
one.
robots, right? That's great. And then obviously with that comes a total set of philosophical problems or puzzles, right? The problem of free will, right? Physical things don't have freedom. They don't have intentionality. They don't have aboutness, right? This desk can't be like, I'm going to be about this next week. But, you know, the reality is this desk and my brain are just a different construct of material nature. And what's fascinating about it is every brain is kind of the same. But consciousness is completely different. I mean, if I had 10 brains, there's Hitler's brain, there's Aquinas' brain, there's Keith's brain, there's Brandon's brain. They would be indeterminate. That brain painted Mona Lisa, that one did an atrocity. But from the point of a physical object, they would be, you know, just brains. Like so there's this idea also too. Well, we are two things, right? We are not only just material, but we also have a metaphysical or spiritual component. So obviously Christians, religious people would say that we are body and soul, right? That we have a soul to us. And, you know, I'm with people as they die. And what you said is kind of really true. When somebody dies in front of you and they go from being a living, breathing human being to a corpse within a matter of seconds, you understand why Jewish people referred to soul as breath, nefesh, this idea of like breathing, because you in the idea that you go, the person leaves their body, that they you know, are exercise, they flee. There's a spiritual component. You see that in death, because what a person is after they died is so different compared to what they were before they did. And when you're with people as they transition from being a living human being, they always remain their humanness, but to being a dead body that gets picked up 2 hours later. And sometimes that can be really, this isn't criticism of any company I've worked with. A lot of times the people who pick up the bodies are not people you choose or people of the family, you know, but you can just see how these people, this is what they do. They just run around and pick up bodies all day. And it's like having a TV taken from your house or a body, you know, I mean, it can have that level of insensitivity at times. And I've even had to, as a chaplain, tell those people, hey, we're giving more time with this person because they got to go. You know, they're picking up another body.
Yeah, it's not a couch.
So, you know, when you think about it from that perspective, you can go to two things, I think. And I'd love to hear you guys. I'm done talking about. You could go to the perspective like when you, like, we're just meat machine, meaningless meat. We're indistinguishable from a gorilla that died or any other primate that died or an animal that died. You know, you see a dead dog on the side of a road. I'm not trying to, obviously humans are more valuable, but a corpse is there's a difference between a living, breathing being and something that's not living and breathing, right? The question with human beings is, there's something obviously so different about human beings in the natural world comparative to every other type of natural living thing. And if you don't see that, then I would just have to have you challenge me, because it just quite seems to me that there's no other animal who thinks, loves, contemplates thinking and loving, has sex, but also thinks about things like love and commitment and fidelity and monogamy and metaphysical views. And so human beings believe all these things that are actually non-material, right? And actually the most important things. I'll give you one example. Our Declaration of Human Rights, right, or independence, we take as self-evident that all people are created equal, you know? Well, there's one fundamental word there that sets that dignity. It's the word created. You know, this idea that we are created equal, that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And so for me, often people, you know, they want to get rid of, you know, the root and hold on to the fruit. You know, like, let's get a religion. But I think there's something very problematic with that. And that's a long conversation where it's like, hey, we can't just get rid of all this stuff. Like, no, we're just like any part of the biological universe, and then think that we retain all it is to be human. Because an animal dying of cancer, a dog dying of cancer, going to the vet is different than your mom dying of cancer.
And why? And
intuitively,
you just know it is.
Is it just your attachment? No, I mean, it's because they can actually hypothesize their encounter with that cancer. They can think, this is my cancer. I'm going through this. There's an I component that's present, right? So materialism, you're just material, dualism, but then there's also this new view, it's called panpsychism, which is this idea that there's consciousness. We all know there's consciousness. I think the fundamental problem of philosophy is the mind-body problem, the philosophical problem of like, how does this meat machine give me conscious awareness? How can I trust the conscious awareness that like I'm not in a simulation right now? All the brain in the vat, all those Cartesian problems, right? Whatever. But there's also this view like that maybe consciousness is a constitutive fact of nature. So maybe we'd live past our physical death. But people think, well, that'd be like supernatural. No, what if nature actually retains the condition of the possibility of consciousness living past your death as a possibility constitutive fact of nature? Does it make sense?
Not of the human organism, but of just...
If I said, do you believe you live after death? Most people would think, oh, that's a supernatural worldview. You have to, but what if consciousness, which seems very unnatural, right? It seems very like, it's not like I can cut open your brain and see this conversation, right? So... Or see a color you're thinking about, right? If you're thinking about blue, it's not like, well, there's blue,
like a TV,
right? So our brain is different from consciousness, right? And anyone who studied this at a high level gets to the place where they're like, yeah, I don't really understand this, right? It's straight up. I mean, totally. From Thomas Nagel, to the greatest philosophers in the world. So I don't go to a secular. I wouldn't identify myself anyway. I think really because I'm just open. I think it's what's called a suspended middle. I think most people want to get to the end. Like this is the way it is, conclude it, and because they don't like living in that suspended middle of like, well, what if it could be this and what if it could be that? When we were kids, they had these books, Choose Your Adventure. You remember those books?
I just saw one yesterday at thrift store. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, do you want the story to end this way or that way? I actually think we're much more in that type of philosophical position than we are in a position like, can't you obviously see there's no God, or can't you obviously see that Jesus is God, or can't you like, you know what I mean? We're not in that can't you obviously see anymore. I think. So we're in a sense where we have to go, it could be this and it could be this, and we have to live in the tension of possibilities. And dude, not many people are very good at that. When you go through ego death, when you go through life deconstruction, you get really good at it.
Yeah.
And when you're around people who are dying all the time, you get really good.
It's kind of living with the ambiguity and the gray and the not being able to make sense of it all, but still wanting to show up every day somehow, right?
And realize like there's so much of a choice, but even the idea that there's a choice, that there's a me who could like choose, like I'm not just a byproduct of my environment or my upbringing or my neurology. So any worldview that would just be fatalistic in that way, well, this is just the way it is, there's no free will. There's like, listen, you can't tell people like, oh, all you are is a meaningless animal and not them expect to act that way, I think. You have to, we long for meaning. Dude, that's why we go to Coachella. That's why we go to Stagecoach. That's why people get tattoos. That's why people like join cults, why they join religions, why they become whatever, like build a brand. All of it is this orientation towards meaning, right? Meaning seeking. And I think I don't want to cut off the possibility of meaning for anybody unless the possibility of that meaning is constructed on the pain and suffering of other people. Where it's like I get my meaning through harming you or through being possessive or powerful than you, and
like not Nazism, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you can be. It's like you tell kids be the best. Yeah, but you don't want your kid to be the best like child murderer or like the best.
Best cheater.
Yeah, the best cheater. It's like so. There's a value. You want a certain. But here's the thing. Like I'm a dad of like preteens, so like I worry a little bit. I still, when you have kids on, it makes you a little conservative some ways, like, cause you're like, yeah, everything's permissible. We're all free. Like, I don't want my kid, I want my kid living a wise, helpful, healthy life. And worldviews and ideas have consequences. That's just true, period. That's not a judgment on any particular worldview or, it is, you have to come to realize these things are not just like meaningless constructions. Like I see in the work that what worldviews do in the actual formation of human beings. And so I think the focus to bring it to what we're talking about, kindness, right? I think Keith's journey, and Keith, our friends, is like, okay, I went to the end of this. I took this journey as far as it could go with the previous journey, and you cut me off if I'm, and I discovered that wasn't it, but I discovered this other thing. This meaning thing, this kindness thing, and it doesn't need all that to be this. It can just be this. It can just be kindness. It could just be about that. I think to me, it's like, well, that's great. That's your meaning. You found that application of you in the world, in the natural environment, And it's something that's so beneficial to the people. I mean, you can just imagine some like person who doubts everything. Well, why the hell should we be kind? Why should we be asshole rising or like, meanness rising, Why are you just, I mean, I can argue with myself about anything, but I just had to go through the pain and loss of like, okay, that hurts other people. Me pretending to be this person hurts me and other people. I don't believe you should think your motivations are pure. I think you should be, self-dialoguing about your motivations and going, could I be lying to myself? Could I be fooling myself? Could I be reacting? Could this be my belief, or could I just be really hurt? I think we build and construct things often out of and from our pain. And that's why people get warped in life. It's not judgment, but you definitely will see people who's like that event impacted them where they became grafted onto that story of now that's who they were. They went through that. They became this. And I think, I also think one of the things I've learned in my life as a chaplain and working in end-of-life care is you can live many lives in this life. And you don't have to be attached. Like, I'm not saying, be a father and then just like, I don't need my kids. I'm just going to abandon it. I'm not talking about that, but I'm just talking about this idea that like, it's okay to go like, from this year to this year, I really believe this passionately. I don't really believe that passionately anymore. And I don't feel bad about it. I just feel like, wow, that was significant to the development of where I was at that time. And just embrace it. Just like the ugliness in your life. One of the things I do, and Keith, you can add to this, is a lot of people have regret at death. Makes sense, right?
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, I always tell people, whenever I meet people like, I got regrets, I'm like, right on. Like, meaning you lived, you swung, you breathed, you loved. You didn't, the ultimate regret for me is like not trying and not attempting anything, and I think that's where people really are screwed up in their life is like, I didn't do it. The things left undone rather than the things tried and failed. Sure. I really see that, but I also see that, you could be a professor for 20 years and then be like, man, I want to be a mechanic, and then like be a stand-up comic and a poet for 10 years. I mean, I'm 41. I'm one of the things we could talk about maybe a little bit is like I went back into music a little bit. I developed some rapping and music and hip hop and like worked with some incredible people, and I want to develop a brand and something out of that. But I want to totally like be the compassionate freestyle rap like dope producer who brings that culture, even if I have a little voice in it, to a level of spiritual consciousness. And by spiritual I mean meaning making. But I should probably be clear about that. I don't define spiritual as metaphysical, like non-physical. I think that's how people mean spiritual. I like the word enthusiasm. The word enthusiasm means to be like, God, theos is part of that, but it's like the spirit, But when somebody's like, enthusiastic and spiritual and has nothing to do with their particular beliefs, it's just there's a meaning orientation to their lives. Like, what I mean? I think Elon Musk is highly spiritual. I think everything he does is driven by this meaning, getting us to Mars, whatever, electric cars, whatever. It's not about money to him. I mean, he's so funny. I mean, he lives in like a prefabbed home on his property. He doesn't own any property. He stays at friends' houses. He's the richest man in the world. And he, posts tweets about like Bill Gates, and I mean, he's just a crazy. But I look at him. I'm so inspired by him, by the way. So if you're out there, Elon, let's hang. But like, I think he's so driven by meaning, and then he gets all this other accolade and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's just a means to get me this. So I think that's very spiritual, because in the sense that it's not carnal. It's not just driven by meeting like your day-to-day desires, because I don't think that's a way to live as a human being. I think you have to manifest something greater. So
thoughts, Brandon?
Man, a lot. There's a.
Where do we go from?
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe I'll flip it on you guys, because I wanted to talk to Keith about this. Keith, you were a very influential person in a lot of people's lives, and as a pastor, and what that's like for people to hoist that up, And I think when you went through your transformation from Christian to humanist, I think you and I both experienced like community loss or whatever. Why is it for you that is so? Why didn't you turn out to be one of those people who's like, yeah, people suck. I'm over it. I tried to do the thing with people, and I tried to gather people, cultivate whatever, and then I just came to realize people suck, and I'm just gonna basically go do my thing. And I mean, like, let's be real, like you could have gone to this place of like, oh, that guy, what he's not doing anything in the meaning making world. Right. He's just pumping stuff out at UPS or doing whatever,
Right.
Yet, like, you came to the end of yourself, your journey, and then you came to this place of like, no, I still have all these things are so true about me. I just gotta say to you, that's so inspiring to me because it taught me and it's teaching me you can be who you are apart from all that other stuff.
Big time, right?
So I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah. And I think Brandon and I kind of went over that in the first podcast a little bit, which was, even though some of my core like beliefs, right, changed, what didn't change, what I realized I got to still hold on to and I wanted to was my values. And the idea of the value of the power of belonging, right? The need for community, whatever you want to call that, belonging, community value, then that personal growth, character development value, then that serving, right? Giving it of others, the one another's, right? Making a difference, right? And then whatever that last one is, awe, wonder, mystery, remember,
I love that.
that one also. And so those did not have to be attached to any particular dogma or story. They seem to have a life bigger than a religious story, right?
Totally.
Of my upbringing. And those finally gave me permission to still be fully Keith, the guy that was into all those same things, even if some of the story, right? How those words found their meaning, right? They're still very meaningful, but how they found their meaning landed. So,
yeah, I think that's really good, and I think one of the things that I would say about people who maybe just stay in the community that they were birthed in, whatever that is, I don't know whatever that is, but there's something powerful, at least once or twice in your life, going from here to there a little bit, like going from like, wow, I found out like I was wrong, or I was, and not coming out the other side of it angry. It's like people who have a bad relationship and like, I just hate men or hate women. And it's like, oh my gosh, man, like the possibility of beauty and life and love and like impact is out there. And I meet a lot of people who don't have the spirit that you have coming out of a religious trauma because they it's like, I wanted it to be true. I wanted it to be, and they feel like angry and duped and like frustrated that they even, gave so much of themselves to it. But going back to that, you live multiple lives. You should see yourself, I believe, like just like a flower awakening. And it's not like a bud isn't like, less beautiful than a fully manifest. It's just part of the journey of a flower,
Right.
It's part of the journey. And eventually, but it's like people feel, if I can't open more, if I open more, it's going to mean I'm not the flower. I'm not this. And I just want to say, if there is a God, and I believe, I'm lean that, I'm a spiritual leader, but I'm not the guy to give you the, if you want to give me money and I'll tell you there is, right? But, I'm not the guy there's no guarantees in life, I don't believe, ever.
Right.
But I've just come to see that, like, if you truly believe that, there's a spiritual power who cares about you, you should be afraid of nothing. And if that power makes you afraid, I would want to ask you, could it be that you've just taken the greatest fears and the worst versions of what people are out there, and you've just made this ego monster, called it God, and it's kept you imprisoned? I told you I respect Jesus. I don't know, for me, people got larger in Jesus's presence when I read those stories often, It's like he invited those who are on the outside to become larger, to imagine themselves as something more dignified and grander and more beautiful. I think the great religion does that. And it's so tragic to me to see so many religion closing people off, shutting people off to that form of growth and development. And I think it's often like, well, I can't have this tradition and that tradition at the same time. But you can, friends. You can eat from the buffet of ideas and not feel guilty. Like, I don't feel guilty at all. Like, I mean, I don't know what you guys are, if you're humans or atheists. I don't feel guilty telling you that I'm impressed by Jesus, right? I have 51%, or whatever. Like, I'm like, whatever. If they're going to judge me for that, that's where I'm at on my journey, or anybody judges me for that.
Right.
And you shouldn't judge your Christian friends or your atheist friends. What you should do is ask the question, how is this all making us fully human? And
That's right.
And if it stops making you fully human, and you know it, like, I just hope there's some people who listen, maybe who have known me from a previous life, they find this and they discover it. What I want to say to you, if I was your pastor, you know, and now you're like, this is Ian, you know, but, you know, Ian was my pastor, is that Ian still wants you to be so full and more human and more full of love. And if you're afraid, if where you're at, your religious context is like, ooh, I can't be more, like, I can't love gay people, like, whoa, I can't wrap my arms around the broken, I can't really be inclusive, I can't really just not be afraid of the judgment of others. I can really trust, you know, that maybe there's a power of beauty that's at work somewhere in this universe that I can, like, that's going to open us up to goodness. You should then, like, you got to ask yourself, like, going to be so filled with hate and judgment, like all those things. And so I've just come to this place where it's like, especially going back to the end of life work, is I often find some with the most religious baggage carry deep pain and fear, because God for them has been the one, he's the final judge, he's the one to find. And I feel great joy for those who believe in God, that my work helps them believe in a God that they're happy to embrace, that they're not afraid of that reality anymore. You know, they're not guilt driven, they're not shame driven. They can die with dignity, and for them who have a theistic belief, they can transform that belief into something where it's an embracing of all of them, the ugly, the good, the bad. And for those who don't have the belief system, it just becomes about this present moment together, and the fact that you're there matters.
That's right.
It matters a lot, you know? So, and the fact that we're there matters. And I think, just to give an endorsement to this organization, you know, the goal is to create environments, right, where people are just welcomed, affirmed, kindness, you know. Oh gosh, man, we need more of that. I need more of that. We need more of that. And I think if anything, those of you out there, join into this, participate, because I think it's something that the world needs.
Right on. Brandon? How's all this hitting you?
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the time on the recording to check how long we've been doing, and it was exactly 1 hour when I checked. Awesome. But now we're at a minute. We're an hour 40 right now, so we could.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. Well, I mean, let me think if there's any questions I have or any. Well,
I know you guys are the edit masters now, but no, it's all. And I appreciate this, and I think, you know, eventually it'd be great to, like, do this, but I wonder if there can be an element where we welcome some questions from people who've gone through the journey, and I think it kind of because. I that's where I find, like, I come alive is going, oh wow, like, you went through that too, you thought that too, like, you processed that too, because there's so much shame and silence and like oh, I'm really scared. Like, okay, the fact that death is scary, okay, death is scary. Like, I don't care if you're religious. I mean, even religious people don't want to die, and they believe they're going to heaven, right?
Right.
Like, so it's like they're like, hey,
no, they believe they might be.
Yeah. But even for the ones, right, who are like 100% like, oh man, my mansion's prepared up there with Jesus, you know, like, you're asking, well,
kicking and screaming.
Right? It's like, no way, you know, no DNR, you know. So, and I'm not judging that. We want to extend life, but death is scary. We got to admit that. And so for me, I'm kind of, I told Keith I want to work on a book, but the title for the book tentatively is The End is the Beginning. And I think for me, it's like, okay, this most horrific, scary thing that we are all, like, it's the only democratic institution. Okay? Death. Yeah. Only democratic institution. If you want something that is democratic, that's it. Okay? And the cool thing, I don't say cool in an affirmative way, so forgive me if that cool means, like, as a cheapened word, but for me, it's valuable to learn from the work I do, is that at the end of life, it all looks the same. Doesn't matter how much money you made. Doesn't matter if you're the president of a country. It doesn't matter if you're president of a bank. Doesn't matter if you were a heroin addict that never had a relationship with your kids. You're going to be on the same hospital bed, same ventilator, same medications, same ending. It's all equal at the end. You want a society where you can find equality, we like talking about that, start with death. Because that will be the thing that shakes the rich and the poor, shakes the powerful and the meek. Death does. And the scariest thing about death is not that we're going to die, but that we have no control over the fragility and mortality of our lives or the lives of anyone we love. That all of us in this life, by just being alive at any moment, can experience the ending of our own life or the life of someone we love.
Can and will.
Can and will. Yeah, you will be a caregiver and you will be cared for. You will, right? Yeah. Okay, so you have to go, everyone's like, we're Seinfeld, how do we turn off the podcast right now? And I get that. It's like, hey, let's get a sexy New York Times bestselling book. Yeah, let's talk about death. Nobody. But here's the thing. I actually do think we're at a time in our culture because of the internet, because of the power of story and the power of, most people would experience a death within their family before social media or the internet or tragedy. You'd know about a national tragedy, maybe like the death of a president or something, even on TV. But now, because of the internet and social media, we are inundated with tragedy and death from every part of the world all the time. Stories from Bangladesh to Bali to it doesn't matter, to Brazil, like all bees, right? Yeah. So
such a preacher.
yeah, straight up. Yeah, but
or a rapper.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is it's universal, right? And we're all afraid of it. But I think for me, I don't know. My son asked me this week, Dad, are you scared? And I said, I know this sounds weird, son, but the most peaceful person at a death scene is the person who's died.
Yeah. The
person who's most at peace in what I call a death scene, which is the context of a person who just went from being alive human being to a person who's now dead. Is they're not freaked out, they're not stressed about anything. Yeah, right. They're in a sense the anxiety. So that should tell us about something.
Sure. Because
we're really afraid for mom to die, but mom died now, and now she's at whatever that is a state of
really afraid for us.
Preach,
and
bro.
What we'll do with right.
And what that puts us in touch with. So going in, but what's interesting actually, that's where we're very different than previous cultures. For example, in England, for years, it was just always common that on a writer's desk would be a skull. And that's why if you look at old pictures, from 1600, 1700, 1800s, you'd see somebody at a desk, there'd be like a quill pen, there'd be a skull. The reason the skull was there was from a Latin phrase, memento mori. Maybe you've ever heard of that, right? Which is a memento, remember that you were going to die, right? But it's not only that, it was meditatio morte. It was this idea that you meditate on your death. I mean, the Stoics would say, don't go to bed at night don't kiss your child at bed at night without saying you might be dead before the morning. It's kind of don't raise your kids that way. But, but the reality.
Metallica song,
Yeah, it's very very metal.
Sandman?
Yeah, Sandman, exactly. Enter Sandman, exactly. Yeah.
It is so metal, dude, And so, but, I had a professor in seminary. Oh, dude, this rocked me. He said, when I chose to have 3 daughters, I chose to dig 3 graves.
Yeah.
And he said, what if my daughters come to me and they're like, Dad, just got home from college. Do you know that we all die? Yes, honey. Yeah, I know that we all die. Dad, did you and Mom know that I was going to die before you guys made love, had me, and brought me into this world? Crap. Yes, honey. We know that you were going to die. Before that, you don't think about that at many baby showers. No one at a baby shower brings a coffin or something crazy or creepy, right?
Well, don't get me. I know it's a little ways off, but we thought we were
just planning ahead.
Just here to celebrate. No, there's nobody who does that. I wouldn't do that, right? But the reality is, honey, did you know that? And Dad, I'm pissed. Why'd you have me? Why'd you bring me into this world? You and Mom knew I was going to die before you made love, before you had me, before you had a baby shower. You brought me into this damn world, and you knew I was going to die. That is the beginning of the philosophical question. Why then? Why do we do it? Why do we keep having kids? Why do we keep and it's because there's something so good about life. So beautiful, precious, miraculous, mysterious, whatever language you want to wrap around it.
Sure.
It is that even in the face of the knowledge that I know by having you that you will too die, there is something so beautiful about the gift of you, the gift of life, that we chose to have you in the face of its ending. There has to be, now, we gotta get there somehow and go, okay, because if not, you will get nihilistic. I think you got to say that could be God for you, could be just the beauty of this life, the opportunity to express this unique, once in a lifetime expression of who this fingerprint of a human being is, in the cosmos of just infinite possibilities. You're the only one that is you. I resonate with that. I mean, it impacts me.
You get to figure out what to make meaning of.
Totally. Right? Explore this gorgeous, beautiful world. Yep. Meet people, eat food, make love, make art, make community, make mistakes, like all of that. So yeah, all of that's going to happen in the face of we die. And what I tell people all the time, well, do you think something happens afterwards? I go, I hope I'm pleasantly surprised, but I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of anything, but I do hope I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I would be blessed and happy if at the moment of death I woke up to the presence of a benevolent deity that loved me. I would. I wouldn't be like, oh, that sucks. Like, send me back to the,
Yeah, I got to pay some bets back on Earth.
Yeah, Pascal's wager here, But I would, right? And if that happens, I'm not, I believe it would be just the continuity of what life is. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm just at this part of the story, and maybe that's where the continuity of life continues. I don't know. But if at the point of my death, it is like, the turning off a light bulb, it's like the shutting off of a computer. It's like the destruction of an iPhone or something like that. If that's what my death is, I think what I could, I'm gonna use a fancy word, bequeath from my life, especially now where we can leave such digital footprints, is the gift of what a life fully alive looks like. In fact, there was a Saint Irenaeus, and he said the glory of God is man fully alive. And I really like that, because so much of religion is like, God, God, oh, everything's God, submit to God, we love and believe in God, give to God. But with Irenaeus was a saint, and he said, no, God's greatest joy, like a parent's greatest joy, if there were a God, like a parent, would be that you become fully alive. I mean, that's what I want my kids to be, just fully alive, not because my kids are adopted, I didn't create them, but because that's the manifestation of their true nature. That's what I'd want for them. So yeah, life ends. And also, too, I mean, it's going to end for all of us, and it might end in a way. I mean, this is another scary thing. I mean, it's like I'm talking right now. I sound so beautiful and articulate, yet I might lose in 30 years, I might be completely insane. Mm-hmm. I might be demented. I might be unable to go take myself to the bathroom. I mean, Ian, listen to your voice. That could be true of you. That's your destiny, Ian. That's your destiny, Brandon. That's your destiny, Keith. That's your destiny, listener. How do you live with that and not get angry and bitter and frustrated and entitled and abusive? I've been all those things. I don't want to be those things anymore, ever again in my life. But that's a wake-up call. And I think for me, it just pushes me into this present moment. This like, oh, God, this moment is so beautiful. So when I'm with my kids, I just go, God, they're just like, they're so beautiful right now. If I could freeze time, and just keep them here. But then I'm like, no, if I did that, like I wouldn't see them tomorrow. I wouldn't see them become what they could be. And so I don't want to freeze time. Right. But time is a bitch, man. Time is a giver and it's a thief at the same time.
Wow.
Time and death are the same word in Hindu.
Yes, right.
It means death. Yeah, time means death.
Yeah, which is amazing to think about, because it's like, time is like this great enemy and possibility, and I think if anything, maybe my faith when I had it really strong was like, well, God will do it. And maybe I've lost a little of that, because I just think, no, I got to do it. If this person in front of me, I have to love them now. Yeah. I have to ask for forgiveness now. I have to,
life.
I have to give now and try. Versus, so I'm there, and I would hope, the future that we can create as people is just where that fear, we become the thing that makes us not afraid. It's like, imagine this, I know Mother Teresa was a religious person. People have lots of criticisms, and Hitchens wrote a book against her and all of that, but the simple idea that, well, we don't want people to die alone in the streets, we want people to die in beds around compassion and
dignity,
love,
man.
So I think, I'm giving this section and season of my life to that. But I also know this, and Keith, you can attest to this. This isn't a work that you can do and undo. Like you can't, you can't. I always tell people, like, you should come hang with me for a week. Just do what I do for a week with me. Just do it. It will change your total perspective.
It's like the raves. It's like, bro, you gotta check this out. You gotta check this out.
You gotta come hang and work with me in death work, you know. But no, it's not like, you know what I mean. Like it's like I've been in some cool environments, you know. But the thing I know about all those environments is eventually, like, those lights are taken down. Like everything gets like shut down.
Impermanence.
And, yes, it's total impermanence, you know. And but then there's this sense of like, okay, like that's okay. There's just, man, it's just my grandma. Maybe you can end on this because I just love my grandma so much. She's still alive. But when I was a little kid, I was really afraid of death. I mean, this is a true story. So afraid of death. I had this brain that was just like, I read Edgar Allan Poe all the time, and I was just like afraid of death. You know what I mean? I was just like always that meta. And my grandma said to me, and she's still alive. And it's so amazing to me to think about what I do now. But she said to me, "Oh, well, you don't have to be afraid of death. You can hold my hand when I die." And I just remember, like, as a little kid, like, wow, she's so tough. She's so strong. You know, it was like, oh, you're afraid of that roller coaster? Don't worry, honey. Once we get on it, I'm gonna strap in the seatbelt. I'm gonna hold the hand, and we're gonna go on the ride. Not together, but I'm gonna show you. I'll go on the ride before you, type of thing.
Well, I want to point out something that she said, because you say, I'll hold your hand, right, to other people while they're dying. But instead of her saying, I'll be okay when I die, I'm going to a better place, she said, I'll let you hold my hand, as if she was inviting you in to being a witness to her,
way back then,
to her dying.
Totally.
Right?
I mean, and
like,
she's not dead. I mean, she's still
like
alive.
the best gift we can give our own kids
powerful.
is an invitation to our dying.
Oh, no, exactly.
Right?
That's what's so tragic, I think, about our culture. I mean, when it comes to death, you know, is that we want to evacuate death from us as quickly. We want to go from death to memorial as quickly as you can. Like death to the cool video, death to the after party, death to the, you know, and that's cool. I think there was this tradition in Judaism called sitting Shiva, where you sit just and mourn for, you know, a period of time. And in Buddhism, that's very true. They you know, they keep the body. There's practices in Buddhism called the manifestation of rainbow body, which is like true holy men. They wait and watch their body shrink and manifest down to a small size in front of them. It's amazing. Google rainbow body. So you know, like, yeah, death was much more incorporated. It was like, you know, death, and in some cultures it's true. Like in some cultures, like certain Hispanic Catholic cultures, very much so, they want the body around. In certain Buddhist cultures, they want to cremate the body in front of everybody. I've been in 2 services where we actually walk from the service, taking the body and cremate it publicly in front of everybody as we watch and throw flowers in the burning fire. I mean, so I've been in all types of environments, you know, and I found those environments that actually put us in closest contact with the reality of death prepare us best for it. For sure. You know, and versus the context that put us in this kind of like amorphous, like, so like, I don't know, someone you love dies, touch them. Yeah. Touch their body. Touch.
Are you saying once they die?
Once they die. At their funeral, if you have a wake, or after, touch them. Touch their body. Feel them. Yeah. Engage with that body. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that's going to be you, bud. Yeah. I say you're going to be that.
Bathe it. Bathe their body.
Yes.
Bathe the body.
Feel what a corpse's hand feels like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Feel it. I mean, and I'm not trying to, I hope this isn't coming off as like, sensational or anyway. What I'm trying to say is, when somebody you have had intimate relationship and depth of a commitment with dies, don't evacuate that moment from you.
No, that's the fully human part.
Every culture
always touched the body, because it was the community that bathed the body and washed the body and shrouded the body and carried the body and dug the hole. But it wasn't until the funeral business became the business. And we'll have Neil O'Connor on in a few weeks from the O'Connor Mortuary, you know. But and we'll talk about the commercialization of the funeral world. But before that, and then they became the professionals. So then we outsourced the touching. And we didn't do ourselves any favors as the human experience.
No, and we went from wakes to funerals to memorial services, and the body kept getting further evacuated from the presence of the remembrance, you know? Mm-hmm. And I get it, you know? Because, you know, it's like scary, you know? It's like, whoa. But here's the thing, man. I don't know. I go away going, wow.
Right.
This is beating right now. Holy goodness, I'm alive. Right now, I'm alive.
Yeah.
And one day I won't be.
Right.
But right now I am. And within the condition of the possibility of life, there's the condition of the possibility of change and beauty and love and fecundity and impact and prosperity. All these things happen in the domain of life. None of those, as far as we know, happen in the domain of death. So if you're listening to me right now, you are the domain of life. You are alive, which means you have the condition of the possibility that the majority of beings on this planet who have ever lived no longer have.
Because they're dead.
Okay? You have that. And you have it for a short, abbreviated amount of time. And so you could do two things with that. It could be like, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? Which part do you start at, right? And some people could just be like, oh my God, this is so heavy, and I need a drink, and I can't handle this, and this is too heavy. I just, listen, bro. If you knew, like, you only had 100 bottles of water for the rest of your life. That's it. 1,000 bottles of water, whatever it is, whatever metaphor, whatever example. You are going to savor and ration and value each drop. Because it's not like there's a faucet, we live in the land of prosperity and faucets, it's like, well, yeah. And that's why also, like, from like the technological aspect, some people are like, oh, cure death, listen, you can't cure fragility. Okay? Maybe you can cure the, cellular mitosis dying. You can reverse aging. You can't reverse fragility. Okay? Like, you can't reverse human fragility. That's something that I believe we're going to be perennially, as long as there's humans, we're going to be fragile humans. To me, to be a human is to be a fragile contradiction. That's what it means to be a human. If you ask me, Ian, what is a human being? A human being is a fragile contradiction. They're more beast than God and more God than beast. They're more man than spirit and more spirit than man. They're all of that.
Things, yeah.
So for me, we can end on this, I guess, but just, I treasure life. I treasure the failures of my life. I treasure the successes of my life. I treasure the opportunities still to be a failure and a success. And by the way, I got more failures coming, guys.
Right.
I got a lot more coming. And I got a lot more mistakes and a lot more fragility. But I hope, I beg, I ask you to hold me accountable to it. I hope that I would be part of a community that would just be always pointing me towards the possibility of what life could be. And that I would want to manifest that with people for the good of people. I have no interest in money. I've had money. I've lost money. I know it's so funny because people are interested in money. I want money so I can flip it on people. I want to give it away. I want to use money as a tool for life because, it's called currency for a reason. Right. It doesn't stay.
Yeah,
it goes,
flows,
right? And so even, at the point of death, I go to people who are like 89 and they're sick and they're dying. If you go, hey, you want $1 billion? They wouldn't take it. Right. They wouldn't take it. It would mean nothing to them because at that point, there's nothing that $1 billion could acquire for them. But so, money's great, use it, but dude, come on guys, like out there's something more meaningful than just the acquisition of things. So.
Good. Dude, this is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, honored to be part of it. Honored to be friends with you guys, and thank you so much.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you or do some plugging?
Yeah. So, I'm a hospice chaplain. I'm not trying to promote anything really right now. I have written some books and done some things in the past. And there's some, if you Google my name, there's stuff out there. I think if I could ask anything from the audience is that they're committed to you guys. And because if somebody wants to be connected to me in any way, I think probably the easiest way at this point would be to connect it to you guys because I'm friends with Keith and now friends with Brandon. And so I would say I'm 100% in and supportive of this vision of Kindness Rising. I love the inclusivity and the multifaceted nature of what you're trying to accomplish. So I am a hospice chaplain. I'm on LinkedIn. You can Google my name and find anything else about me. But I'm kind of co-evolving in this universe too. So I don't know what might be there right now might not be the reality of what represents me a year from now.
And when something else comes up, we'll bring you back on.
Yeah. But I would say if you want to be connected, and I would say just end on this. Anyone who, when I listened to your story, I told you this too, Keith. I was like amen in Keith's story because I was like, I know that guy. I went to that church. I know that experience. I've been through that journey. I had that kind of like moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I resonate with everything that kind of like that feels so wow. Yeah, I get it. So I imagine that those who are going to listen to this, to you, to me, to whoever you're having on there. There's going to be moments of that resonance. Don't let that stay in your soul. Reach out, participate,
for sure.
Give, manifest that resonance. I want to hear that resonance. If you hear this and I was your pastor and you've gone through a journey, I'd love for you to message Keith or Brandon. I mean, I want to hear that because I think that's how we're going to equip each other towards a greater, community and peace.
That's rad. Brandon, if people are wanting to message us, can they do it even on social media?
Yeah, you could DM us on Instagram. We're kindness_rising, at kindness_rising. You could also go to our contact page on our website, which I believe is kindnessrising.community/contact us. But it's also, if you just go to the homepage, it's one of the tabs you can click on.
And then we've got a Facebook page. It's just,
we also have a Facebook page.
But that's a great way to start dialogue. Even if people have questions, send us questions, either Facebook or
Instagram. This podcast also might be, so you might be listening to this on YouTube. We put our podcast, so you could comment in the YouTube comments would be a great way if you're listening to this on YouTube, because that's how actually you listen to it, right, Ian? Yeah,
100%.
So, yeah. Any other ways you could throw a letter underneath Keith's office door?
Send some smoke signals up in the sky and just say that,
right.
No, but I listen. I mean, I think one of the blessings and curses of the world we live in is that's kind of so thin. It's like, if you want to find out something about somebody and get a hold of somebody, it seems like now there's far more of an easy way to do that, than even 20 years ago. Yeah. So be part of something and just manifest kindness, something good in your life. And I just got to end too. If you felt like you've done too many things, made too many mistakes, tried too many hats. I've noticed that too. People are like, man, okay, I tried the Christian thing, it didn't work. I tried the atheist thing, it didn't work. I don't want to be a Buddhist now. It's like I tried, they're kind of done with the like buying into the worldview and the subculture of anything, right? I get that. But if that's you, I think you're going to find a space where you're really welcomed and loved with Kindness Rising. Yeah. So
and if the topic of death, grief, passing, aging, funeral, all mortality interests you, has curiosity, fear, every month we have a death cafe and a grief cafe that happen in Costa Mesa, live and in person from 7 to 8:30. You can get information on the website.
Yep. Go to kindnessrising.community/events.
And the
calendar.
Death Cafe really orbits around the topic of death and dying, and what is that? The curiosity, the fear, the interests around that. Maybe you don't feel like you can bring it up to your friends or family. You don't know where. You feel like it's going to be weird. It's not weird at Death Cafe. And then Grief Cafe is, we all have different losses, from people we love to jobs to pets to careers to identities. And Grief Cafe is a place where we are holding space for one another as we are sharing out loud and processing something or someone that we are experiencing an ending with.
So true. It's funny. I just want to say it's kind of funny anecdote. I go to like my local Starbucks or whatever, and stuff. And when I go into places, often it's kind of like Cheers. Like Ian, like kind of just like one of those guys that people somehow know. I don't know why that's the case. I don't know. It's like if I have a smell, that they recognize me by. But I walk in, and this one time, this one barista was like, Ian, you're just like, I don't know what it is about you. You're just like really positive. Like you just bring up, like when you come up here, it's like, wow, yeah, we all feel pumped after you leave. Like, and Ian was just, oh, did you see Ian? Ian's awesome. And they don't know me, And then they go, what do you do? So the setup was like, Ian, you're so happy, positive, amazing.
You must be a motivational speaker.
Yeah, and then, I'm total motivational speaker. And then I'm like, oh, I help people die well. And no joke, this girl looks at me, she started crying. Yeah. There's like 5 people behind me in the line. Right. And you know what she said? What? I am so afraid of death. Yeah. And lately I've been thinking about it. My parents are going to die. She's probably like 25, Yeah. And it was like, people are probably thinking, what did I say to this poor girl? Because
it's creep. Yeah.
It's creep. What did she just say?
She made his latte wrong.
I'm like, So I'm just talking to her, but she was like, it was just like, it was like almost humorous because it was like, well, what do you do? It was like, she expected me to say something totally contradictory. When I told her what I did, she felt like I'm I'm afraid of this. And so maybe you feel that way, reach out. Yeah.
All right, Brandon, bring us home.
All right. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Anything funny, Mr. Stand-Up?
Anything funny we could try? Any jokes? Any new jokes?
Hey, if you have not heard Brandon, you got to come out in person Friday nights at Moon Goat Coffee in Costa Mesa, Friday 6 to 10. Mm-hmm. It's hilarious. It's fun. It's crazy. It's hokey.
It's an open mic. We got a lot more comedians than we used to. They're taking over.
And the comedians are taking over. If you've ever wanted to do spoken word or rap or play guitar, not good, or anything else, come. And Brandon does some stand-up, and I'm the loudest guy laughing, partly probably because I just love you, but also it's good shit.
It's
so.
it's a fun time. What's my newest joke that went pretty well? It's like Jeff Bezos thinks that we're going to go to the moon. This guy can't even cure baldness. What's the deal?
That's true. I know, my hair's thinning too.
There you go.
All right, y'all.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Keep it kind. Peace.
Bye.
As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate.